voice get louder with the rooms?
Yes, it opens everything up. Have a roll microphone too. All right, roll call.
Austin,
Here.
Illingworth,
Here.
Kimbrell. Here. Patterson.
Here.
Rusterholz.
Here. Let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. Mr. Austin, would you lead us, please?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. On to the approval of the agenda. Have a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Got a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Austin,
Aye.
Illingworth,
Aye.
Kimbrell.
Aye.
Patterson.
Aye.
Rusterholz.
Aye. On to item 4, consent calendar. We have already approved that. We'll move on to, I need a motion to approve the consent agenda, please.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call.
Austin,
Aye.
Illingworth,
Aye.
Kimbrell. Aye. Patterson.
Aye.
Rusterholz.
Aye.
Numeral 5, information and discussion. So let's hand that over. That was Dr. Neal and
Yes, that's correct. Thank you, members of the board. I appreciate you taking the time tonight, and especially appreciate Cassie and Mr. Illingworth, David. Spent some time this last week with executive staff, and they will come here in just a second. But just to summarize, the committee was tasked with looking at what is the best way forward. And there's a lot of different options. You know, we discussed it at the last meeting. I'm not going to spend time this evening going through a lot of different options. But the two topics we will discuss tonight is the immediate transfer of authority for day-to-day decision-making, kind of what that looks like and what the committee discussed. And Cassie and David, if you want to throw in on that at any point. The second topic is I was asked by the committee to look at the search process and how do we go about that search process. And so have contacted a couple consulting firms. I have that report tonight that I'll hand the board as a whole. It's not something to take action on tonight, it's just to kind of plant the seed. I think the committee was requesting time to look at it, review it, and not, I mean, you got to marinate sort of through this. And so I'll be giving the board that tonight, and then we'll maintain kind of that advisory role over the next 6 months as I'm trying to help give advice when needed and kind of what the board needs in each stage of that discussion. And so first and foremost is how do we want to start the school year? And I thought we had a really productive meeting. We have a little bit of a proposal this evening for that. And then second will then be to go through this consulting report. Mr. Illingworth and Cassie, do you want to, or Ms. Kimbrell?
I thought you did really well as far as summarizing that in our meeting, and I really appreciate the time that you, Tina and Neal, gave with us and that presented. And so I would like to hear, sort of showcase that before we go into a discussion.
Clarify for me, are you thinking you want to do the consultant idea first?
No,
Okay.
Dell and Tina.
Great. I think that's great. Ms. Castens? Mr. Garrett?
They're just going to hold it. All right, well, first, thanks for everybody for showing up tonight. It's kind of a strange setup, so I'm used to standing over here and talking to a board, and so this back and forth thing is a little odd, so I appreciate that. You know, one of the things that when you're in the education world for a long, long time, like I have 30, I think it was one of my 31st year in education, not all in my senior year, but 30 years in education. One of the things that we know is the ebb and flow of leadership and the ebb and flow of public school years happen sometimes slowly, sometimes very rapidly. And we know for sure one thing is come August 22nd or whatever that day is, kids are going to show up in our classrooms and we have to be ready. We have to be ready to go. So regardless of a leadership structure or a leadership void or a leadership surge, we have to be ready for the school year. We have to be ready for our staff to be ready for school year, and we have to get going to be the best kickoff possible. Unfortunately, in the recent past, we've had some experiences where we didn't have a superintendent in place. And so we've had to come together as a team, as an executive team, and figure out what those duties look like and continue to get our school years running smoothly and continue on with the great things that happen in our schools. So when we heard and we knew this kind of transition was going to be happening, our executive team sat down quickly and went, we don't know what the outcome of this is going to be. We know what the first step is, but regardless, we have to be ready for our school year. We have to be ready for getting our staff in place, be ready for the curriculums, whatever needs to happen. It's going to happen regardless of superintendent's there or not. So our team looked at it, and we came up with a proposal of what this a structure could look like. Anything from 2 days to 10 months or whatever it may be. It's a workable solution in our eyes and from our team's input.
So when we looked at this, we were asked to address a couple of purposes. So the structure we're going to show you here in a minute, we feel like provides an immediate leadership structure that utilizes our existing staff members in a matrix structure. And we know the board talked about that a little bit at their last meeting. We feel like it mitigates uncertainty in launching the 22-23 school year. Our admin team shows up next Monday. So they hit the doors and we have a retreat that was on the books Tuesday and Wednesday. So like Del said, they're coming. We can't go, wait, we're not ready yet. So they hit the doors. Our new teachers hit the doors the 10th and 11th of August. So we feel like this mitigates that uncertainty. It provides a starting point for our school year. We feel like it allows time for the board to determine next steps. And we feel like it outlines a sustainable solution that could be in place, like Del said, for a very short time or for the school year if that's what's needed. So what we'd like to show you is what that plan looks like.
And Tina, just for clarification, this was the plan one of the plans that we reviewed with the committee. So this is not the first time the committee is seeing this. The committee has already gone through this one time and has made adjustments or encouragements or adaptations. And so this is really the committee's report as tasked by this board to come back to this board, if that makes sense.
And what's on the screen now is kind of an overview of a separation of duties in order to get our work done from a district level standpoint. So you can see we've had two different kind of slots or positions. One is more operational type, and that would be a chief of staff in my current role. And that would be, we didn't want to list every single task we get going on because we'd be here till next week sometime. But in general, we look at the big components of what we're looking at. And so you can see the human relations piece, everything from the HR world, from the transactional to transitional to different roles there. Business and service finance, this is a new thing, right? We don't have a CFO right now, but we do have a great business team. We do have our business manager who does the nuts and bolts of the accounting, and the leadership team are leading that team and being part of that strategic planning of that team. We'll take that in this role, overseeing the operations with Mr. Miles Tuttle and all the different things, maintenance, facilities, school security, some of the transportation, all of our insurance, disability, the employee relations. I'll sit with the Rural Alliance and the regional superintendents meetings, be oversight of the district health team, everything from nurses to our wellness coordinators, all of those. Still working with educator effectiveness, and the charter school co-liaison, which I love that word, liaison. So,
On the other side, we have, we titled the Chief Academic Officer, so that's the role that parts of what I have. So looking at curriculum and instruction, data and assessment, special programs dealing with things like our online program, preschool, enrichment academy, any of those kind of dedicated programs, student services, which includes our counselors, our mental health team, working with our grants, which I work with a large majority of our mental health grants, but also looking at our ESSER grant. I also oversee our consolidated grant. So all of those grants in one place, because it kind of takes similar processes working with the grants. Serving as the school board liaison, so the person that is helping, with the liaison between the board and the district with agenda setting and things like that. Serving as the BOCES liaison with Marcy and working with our BOCES. The district accountability committee, overseeing principal evaluation for our 5 buildings, and again, serving as a co-liaison for the charter school. Because we really see that the charter school has kind of the financial side, but also the curriculum assessment programs and things like that.
Just brief questions from the board if you have ideas or thoughts on this.
I do have a question. It's kind of a repeat that we've had, but I'd like to hear where it's gone to. This past year when Dr. Neal was here, both of you were extremely busy. I mean, you were here after hours, coming in early, staying late. Now with this added responsibility, my concern is for you both, very, very capable people that, I'm very glad to have you be able to step in and be in charge. I'd like to hear your thoughts on what kind of support do you have to do your additional job? Do you have additional staff that is helping you? So if you could, I don't know as much detail as you
So
want.
that's kind of the next slide.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's the next slide.
So in their defense, I think we started this conversation last week over the period of time, and there was a thought of Superman and Superwoman taking the world over. And I think we had a realistic conversation, didn't we, about that's not going to be possible. A really need for the two of you, them, to think about how do they delegate, how do they defray some of their responsibilities. Dell in the last 30 days has gone from responsibility of one department to responsibility of 2 departments, now to the responsibility of all of these. And so that, I think they spent quite a bit of time looking at that. And one of the cautions to the board as we step to this next level is what we're about to suggest does take some ramp up. I mean, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. And so if the board is thinking this is a 2-week solution, that's a lot of work for 2 weeks. Right? If the board is thinking this is a 2-month solution, it's still a lot of work for 2 months. So it's one of those, as you're thinking about approving this tonight, if this is in your heart to say, this is a little bit more of a longer term until you find a permanent. I would not suggest that the board think in their minds as an interim superintendent would be appointed anytime in the foreseeable future, that it would be a standard interview cycle. I mean, I think that's kind of where the committee we sort of landed was, this is a kind of a year-long solution, and unless something just brilliant happens in the middle of the year, this is going to be a year-long solution, right? I mean, that's kind of a little bit of the mentality, that this is not a 2-week or even a 2-month. That when the board, and that's the packet that I have for you next, when the board goes through the hiring process of the superintendent, it would be for a July 23 start. And Dale would have less hair, Tina would be exhausted, it'll be after a year of kind of doing this, but that we'll get through and be successful.
And I would say we're going to show you the org chart that shows the supports that come under each of these categories. But I think you also have to remember that there's an element of responsibility when we also bring in a new superintendent. So there's also onboarding that happens when you bring someone new into the system that involves work also. So there is an element when you have to onboard people that come from outside the district that involves some work too. So that, it's work either way. But I guess, and when we looked at this, we worked with our team and we felt like it was a very doable solution. And like Dell said, I've lived in it twice. I lived in it when Jed Bowman, our superintendent, was out, and Linda Bryan and I had a similar structure. And I lived in it when Steve Wolf was out. So our team again stepped up. And even though we named an interim superintendent, I would say that we all jumped in and all worked together to make things function for the district. So we're going to show you how this breaks down with people that sit underneath all of these things that support us.
Before I jump into that, I'd like to add to that a little bit, and that what I feel is one of the strong suits of our executive team and our staff in general is the collaborative nature of how we attack issues and problems and things that come up. We do that anyway. So that previous slide that you looked at where the differentiated responsibilities, I wouldn't say that they're binary or finite anyway. There's a lot of crossover throughout the entire process with all of our team, and so that's a great part. So into my organizational charts here, you can see the different across the top. Those kind of wrap up that previous slide of what was the general responsibilities and the teams that we would have that would help with that. And so, Mr. Russell, to help you with that, the answer of, do we have the time to do that? Well, we are going to have to delegate. We are going to have to have some teams, and we have a lot of them in place. So we look under the operations and tech. We do have a facilities and maintenance coordinator that's even one step, not below in terms of personality, but one step below in the organization chart to our director of operations. So we have a director of operations. Then we have the facilities and maintenance coordinator that I would be delegating to and pushing out those things, being responsible for. District safety and security coordinator, that was important. We brought that back on for those that you remember, we talked about that. Our systems administrator and the Durham bus manager, so our contracted service. So all of those things lie underneath Mr. Miles Tuttle, and then I would oversee Miles, and we would collaborate on the operations piece. On the business services, we did talk about that briefly just a second ago. This used to be, the CFO in our system, and so we have now hired a business service manager, which I would oversee, who's taken on a lot of those accounting. I can do math, and I can do math really well, but I've never did FIFO, LIFO, whatever that. Those are the only accounting terms I remember from high school. So you're an accountant, sorry. But in terms of the strategic place, I'll be overseeing that. Within that, we'll have the business department and our building secretaries and accountants, and then our Chartwell manager, which again is another contracted piece to our services. We do have the public information officer. You all know her as Lindsay. Lindsay will be working with me and setting some directions in collaboration with the board and the districts and the goals that we want to have for our communication. That will fall there. Health team, I talked about that earlier, the nurse and our coordinator. And then we also have an HR specialist we currently have in our system, Peggy Gonzalez. And so a lot of the transactional things that we're taking up, some of the HR side when I was sitting there, are going to be transferred on the transactional side to Peggy, so that removes that piece. And so she'll take a little bit higher role in the HR process, and then we'll have hired an administrative assistant as well that will help serve myself and others in all of those categories. And the other thing, I'm sorry, Tina, that was a psych. David, my dad used to say, "How do you eat an elephant?" Right? One bite at a time. So, it was a big elephant. We'll see, right? We'll just eat it one bite at a time.
My main question was, though, looking over these earlier, that I wanted to make sure you feel comfortable if we're going to go with this program, that you have enough room to be able to operate and function and put people in place that you need. That's my biggest concern.
And I feel I feel strongly that the personalities and the people we have in these teams of below, they've not only been here, a lot of them have been here a long time going through the same processes, but they're very talented and are going to educate me along the way. And so I feel confident being able to do this with those teams in place.
Chris?
Bill, if we could highlight, what of those positions and responsibilities are new hires? You have new hires there, are those all people that are within the district?
There are some new hires, there is one, look at this, I think there's one that's an additional, a new hire, like a new position.
Yes,
And then that's the administrative assistant.
okay.
And the business services.
And the business service, yeah. Trying to see on the chart, but.
Okay.
So the business service manager, the business manager came from within and promoted up to a business manager piece.
But it's a new role.
A new role, but not a new
Not a new
individual,
person.
not new to the district,
Yeah.
not new to the system,
Yeah.
within the finance organization. Okay, thank you.
And even the executive administrative assistants,
Yes.
new position, but promoted someone from within. So someone that knows all of our central, in fact, someone that's worked as a registrar and in the business services department and in the schools, so has an extensive knowledge of our schools.
Yeah, that helps me because you were talking about the onboarding and the work, the labor intensive dynamics of that. So this helps me get a sense that those are transitions into new positions, but they're with people that are highly familiar and you know them.
Everyone on the blue line
Yeah.
is somebody that works here now.
Okay.
So if you look here, you'll also see some new things. So with curriculum and assessment, we are proposing that we assign one of our building administrators up into central office during this interim time. So we're proposing that we look and we have some suggestions we talked about, but we looked at our administrative team in the buildings, which is also, aside from one assistant principal, all returning, all very veteran staff members. So we're proposing moving someone up that has extensive curriculum and assessment knowledge. So moving them up, they would oversee the online program, and they would also oversee, we've also designated an internal person that's helping to build and grow our online program. So we made that decision last spring to hopefully help put some energy into our online programming. We also have all of our building instructional leads. So each of our building has a dean or an instructional lead that addresses curriculum and assessment. We have our mental health supervisor that we added last year. So that person would oversee our restorative practices supervisor. We have a school-based therapist that's been in the district, was added last year, and our building mental health teams. So that person would oversee those people. Those are all people in the system. We have BOCES, and in the district, we have an administrative assistant that works for Woodland Park School District that basically works with the BOCES. So she handles administrative tasks within the district for our special education under the direction of the BOCES as well as the chief academic officer. For special programs, we do have a preschool coordinator that will oversee Gateway, in addition to we added a branch out at Summit. So that person will oversee our preschool, and we have an ELL coordinator who oversees ELL for the district. We have our building principals. So under this org chart would be the building principals who oversee their assistant principals. And then we have our executive administrative assistant right here. So this org chart involves bringing up. So your question was, how are you doing this? So this does involve bringing up a person. But we feel like when we have existing staff, that's a case where we feel like it's immediate. We can bring that person in, they know exactly where they're going, what they're doing. And this person would actually offload some of what sits under our HR right now with new staff, just working with new staff and working with our induction program. So there's a little bit in this side where it says curriculum assessment supervisor that would come out of Dell's area because it plays really to the strengths of that person and getting them in and boots on the ground right away.
So again, to reiterate, what they're suggesting is that we'll be bringing one administrative assistant, which was already sort of planned with the CFO transition, right? That was part of that defrayal of responsibilities off of Dell's HR world, clerical, coding, calculating of salaries, that kind of work. So that position, while already there, would assist Dell distinctly. And then this curriculum and assessment supervisor would be somebody that is actually not an increase in overall budgetary requirement. It would not be an added FTE or added overhead. It would be somebody within our system, depending on who it is, that it would come up from the inside and would take on the full-time responsibilities. And the team that they would be leaving would pick up some of the slack on that. So you'd be looking at a full-time curriculum and assessment supervisor that would sort of help Dell and Tina both. So in actually neither case would this bring an additional cost or FTE cost to the district, but it would be a reallocation of responsibilities and job orders and job tasks that I think the team has worked really hard not to spend any more money on. Now, I would advise that if you got to the point in the year where Dell and Tina were maxing out and they just felt like this is too much, then the board would need to consider at that point that there was an additional staffing expectation or need mid-year. Hard to do mid-year. Sounds like the team's got it planned, but just a consideration. And I appreciate Dell and Tina always working fiscally conservative first and making sure that kids get the money in the schools, not administrative overhead.
So the one area that I'm not seeing where it says in your leadership overview is charter school co-liaison. Is Tom Weston still going to be the charter school liaison
Yep.
for Merit Academy?
Yep.
And so you'll be working with Tom?
We
So-
would be the point person.
The splitting of jobs, going back to the previous, you don't have to go back there, but really Tina's going to continue to handle all the administrative or the academic, sorry, the word was, I haven't had dinner yet tonight, so it was like, it wasn't
I got
there yet.
kids.
And Dell's going to take all the operations side, so it just kind of made sense to make it a co-leadership role.
I want to say thank you to Tina and Dell for putting
Yes.
this together. And during our subcommittee, we asked them if they could elaborate on the flow chart so the rest of the board could see it. You know, it would have been perfectly fine if we would have did all this presentation for them, but they had already laid this out. They already knew and sort of split up and then their roles, where they were going to go with the district. And I just thought they did a great job presenting this to us. So I asked them, and we asked them if they would present it to you guys as well. And so your question about, will they have enough staff, like how is that going to look, is the reason why I was like, hey, can we elaborate on this? Because we want to know that as well. And even as we continue, I would advise that we continue this subcommittee so we can work with executive staff and admin and to see if there is an overload, if there is something that they need to talk about or something we can bring to the board. And so.
And I would say that Dell and I have been around a while, served in various roles for the district. We kind of know how a lot of the district functions. Actually, I think at central office I've had about 5 different roles. So I've seen various pieces and parts. And I think I can say for myself, I won't speak for Dell, that I feel confident that we can make this system work effectively. So I do feel confident about that. And I feel like it's due to the strength of the longevity we have in some of our positions and the strength of the people we have. And so I feel like it is, you asked, is it a doable plan? Yes, I feel like it's very doable.
So let me illustrate one other thing that Dell and Tina would not illustrate probably, and that is the district would not be paying the cost of a salary for a superintendent. And so some of that money would need to go to Dell and Tina to kind of be the difference between what they're currently earning and that is what a superintendent would earn. So my proposal would be simply to adjust their salaries to be that of a superintendent. It'd be about a 25 to 30% of what the actual cost of a superintendent would be. The remaining cost of a superintendent's salary would be used for the search process, should you choose to hire a consultant, the advertising and whatnot through that process. So it's kind of an internal memo that I would simply do to their files and cause their salaries to be that equal to each other and equal to that of a standard superintendent, basically my salary for this year. And by percentage, that would be somewhere around 20-25% increase in pay.
I see our attorney raising his hand.
If you don't mind, can I just?
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Matt. I'm wondering if there needs to be like an MOU or an addendum. You know, we've got new job duties. I'd love to document those and sort of, put something together with you guys, sort of MOU to your contracts. Maybe I can work with you guys in the committee to do that. Just a way of clarity.
Thank you.
Yeah, when we met with the team, this plan was, I think this is the plan. You guys brought this right in and already had it ready to go. And any concerns I may have had speculatively were immediately put to rest because we have such a veteran team. I mean, you know, it's almost unfair, Dell and Tina, to say you guys are very experienced. I mean, we kind of know that, but I think. Would you mind sharing with us a little bit about, you know, when we say you guys have experience working in this school district, it goes beyond that. Because Dell, I believe you were a student here. Can you share with us a little bit about y'all's time in the school district, because it really covers everything, I think.
Yeah, if you have about 2 hours, I can go ahead and, you know, as Mr. Illingworth alluded to, I did grow up here. My dad and his wife were both teachers here for, they never had me in class because they didn't like my style of student, I don't think. So I did grow up here, graduated K through 12 through here. Did come back, or did leave the state for a little bit. When I came back in the year 2000, began my career in our school district. I began as a teacher. So as a teacher over in the high school. I was there as a teacher 4 or 5 years, somewhere in there. I became the district athletic director. At that time, we had a district athletic director. So I was the district athletic director for 3 or 4 years, and became the high school principal for 11 years, 10 or 11 years. And then in that time, moved over here. This might be my 4th year in the central office, central office world. So about where you're sitting is where my dad's classroom was when he was teaching here. So that's an interesting, you know, I think it's right about there. Chris, you might know a little bit about that.
I came to the district in 1995, so came from Omaha. I taught in Omaha before I came here. Entered in the middle school, so I taught middle school 7th grade math for 6 years on a really high power team, great team I taught with. Then I became the IRT for 4 years, and then I was the middle school assistant principal for 8 years. I've been at central office for, I just counted it, I think 9 years. I came over as the Director of Educator Effectiveness and Technology. I've also been, I didn't lose that, I gained then the Director of Secondary Schools, so they just added. Then I was the Director of Mental Health, and then last year brought in, again, kept mental health, and added in, gave tech away, gave educator effectiveness away, added in curriculum and assessment last year. So I've had quite a variety of roles at central office, have previously evaluated our secondary principals, so kind of done a lot aside from finance, but I've written and managed a whole lot of grants for the district to the tune of millions of dollars. So have some experience in finance of helping with the grants.
Right. You know, I mean, what struck me, David, was not just that, you know, with Tina and Dell, and so many of our leaders, like, I mean, you really can't stump Tina or Dell because they've seen it all, they've done it all. But one of the things that they really impressed upon Cassie and I was that our team has been together for quite a long time, and they've been working in different areas together, and so they're very good at doing all sorts of different things, but also really working as a team. And that was an important point about, like y'all were mentioning about bringing somebody into the central office to work with the online program and everything that, and like Ms. Cassins was saying about onboarding a new superintendent, this would be a different kind of project if we had a lot of sort of newer faces and people who are less experienced not only in these jobs but in the school district, and we're really fortunate that what we have is actually a team that has been working together a long time in various places within the school district, in various positions of leadership. So I felt like, wow, I don't even know that it was, I almost feel like you guys kind of just had this ready to go, because like you said, you've had to do this a couple times in the not so distant past. And so they were kind of like just ready to go, and they told us we can do this for 2 weeks or the entire year, and they felt very confident that the mission of the school district would get accomplished under their leadership with very little, I think, I'm not going to say hiccups, but just very little transition. They're right on top of it. So I think one of the only questions I had for you at the time was about contracts. Now somebody's got to authorize those contracts, and that's where there's a little bit of a change, because with the change from Brian's role to our new business service director's role, can you guys explain to the board how you see that going forward?
So David, are you talking about when, before contracts come to the board, the preparation and the sending and the calculation and the kind of the processing of those? Or are you from an employment contract? Or are you thinking
No.
like the guy that paved the street outside and the HVAC replacement, those kind of things?
Right, and we see employment contracts,
Correct.
but we don't typically see third-party contracts.
Correct.
Yeah.
Contracts.
Yes, sir. Could you all explain that to us?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's good, that does fall within that matrix as well with our business manager. So we have within our, even before this, when we were just taking over the CFO part, we have a system set up where all of our people are responsible for that budget or for that particular project's budget. They will run their request for contract, request for projects through their leadership, and in most cases that would be Miles. That comes to myself and our business manager, and then together we look at it, make sure A, are we meeting the guidelines that are required within law, and B, are we doing it fiscally responsibly? And then once that's arranged, then the signature from those parties would come from myself.
Okay.
I might offer, and I think too, at first I didn't understand when you asked us that in the meeting. I think there's also, because I look at, in my realm, there's contracts like curriculum contracts and things we sign for the state. So when we have assurances, and we have the board president sign and the superintendent signs. So the question would be like, who's the superintendent that signs when we sign those things? And I would probably advise, and those are things that we're going to hit and go, oh, what do we do with this? I would advise that it'd probably be both of us, because then it has that checks and balances of seeing it from the financial world, seeing it from the programming world, and being like, okay, yeah, that's like the consolidated grant had to be signed by the superintendent. So I can see where the question is, who is that? So I would see that my answer would be that it would, when it comes to those contracts, I think it would be both of us.
Okay. And I guess,
Well, I would just like to say that my signature will be on top. I just want to.
and I think that makes sense. I would only ask, of course, to make sure and consult with Mr. Miller that we're doing everything the right way, and whether we need to do an MOU or adopt a resolution or something to make sure that you're properly empowered to perform those duties.
I do have a question for Brad Miller in regard to exactly this kind of thing. Would this be like an employment contract, or would this resort be just a letter or memorandum of understanding what job expectations or delineations should be?
Thank you, David. So we're not the only example of a situation where there's not a superintendent in place, and I work with Falcon where there's a matrix leadership system in place, and they've actually designated just one side of the house to be signator on those sorts of things. With regard to CDE and grants and those sorts of things, I fully endorse this two-signature model. It really, really makes sense, and I'll try to build into what I'm proposing as an MOU that would just designate the roles and responsibilities so everybody's got clarity, so that you can properly hold each of them accountable to their roles. And if this is a 10-month thing, we want successful little humans coming out of schools, we want to know who we're asking to get it done. So we'll engage it that way, I think. Did that answer your question?
Yes, that
We might need to have Tina touch base with CDE and say, what do we need to do on this one, to formalize our request for reconsideration of a CMAS or something like that. We need to make sure we've got clarity, but we'll get there.
So this is something I just want to make sure that if we're going forward with this, and this would be part of our liaison team for the school leadership, would be with Cassie and with Dave. You would be working through that and making a report back to the board.
So let me clarify.
Like on the letter of memorandum of understanding.
And I may have to defer to Brad on this too. That may require the board to have another committee set up, and only because the original committee had language. I'm looking at Kelly. Okay. The original committee was, and again, the board can do whatever you want to on this. I'm not trying to step on any toes at all. But the original committee was set up for the development of a short-term solution to the superintendent issue. If you wanted a long-term solution or a perpetual kind of committee, modulate, change that committee, adapt it. But the language originally was for the short term.
I think if the subcommittee were to be about managing them and their roles, I think you need a new delegation. But I don't think that this committee has satisfied its total commitment, which is to design your process going forward into your next, era. So maybe two.
So picking superintendent and succession, probably the committee's purview. Sounds like committee's purview. Management of those that have been designated, new committee. Okay. Is that?
What did you say, Dave?
I was going to say, right, when we formed the committee, it was about short-term leadership solution proposals, and so it's not about managing. Now,
Yes.
putting a team in place is something where we can be consulted in doing, whether it's MOUs and things like that. I think that's appropriate to keep the committee informed, but we don't have the authority to yay or nay anything. Everything has to come back to the board. We're just there to consult with our leadership and make sure that we are all basically making informed opinions on things. And so like I said, they had this plan pretty much ready to go. We had a couple of little questions that they had pretty ready answers to. And so it was a great meeting. I'm very proud to be able to have Dell and Tina take the reins and know that they're more than capable. So Cassie and I were listening and learning.
Yeah, and President Resterholt, you talked about, micromanaging and macromanaging, and we did not go in there and say, hey, you do this, you do that. I mean, they had this presented, they sort of shared where their strengths are, where they're not, and they even spoke about it tonight, how they might be leaning on one another. And so to see that and see their dynamic, it was refreshing, and it gave us confidence to come in here and hopefully for our other board members to see this lay out and ask those questions.
I have an agenda clarification, if I may, Mr. President.
Please.
Before we shift off totally and let the two of you off the hook, there will probably need to be a motion to kind of approve this with the MOU kind of thing. However, before we do that motion, I feel germane to that process to go ahead and talk about the long-term superintendent search, because there's only one item on the agenda and there's only one item for action. So once the board takes action this evening, we'll actually be done for the evening. So I would suggest that at this point, if it pleases the board, if we would shift off, and with Tina and Dell joining us through that process, you have your own packets, staying with us and talking about the search and selection of a superintendent of schools, if I can hand this out, without forgetting maybe the motion that you might be proposing right now to approve this. If we could kind of keep this in that context as well, if that's appropriate.
Yeah, I think it's appropriate.
So clarification, stand?
I think you're staying, sorry.
Okay. Did you get one?
You're welcome to sit, right? All right, so, and I probably handed the one out with my notes on it. If you're getting one with scribbles, then you've got the clip notes already. And I will just go ahead and draw your attention to a couple things. McPherson & Jacobson is the predominant search firm in the state of Colorado. Just flip to the very last page in the back side, the very last page. These are the searches that they have done in Colorado this past year. And so they are the Colorado Association of School Boards designates McPherson & Jacobson. They have consultants all over the West. However, there are other companies you can go to, Ray & Associates or Northwest Education Associates. These McPherson & Jacobson are really Colorado people. They're doing the search right now for Steamboat Springs. They've just finished the search, the third search for Strasburg, because the first two searches, nobody wanted to go out to Strasburg, so they kind of know the industry. They also know the network of leaders here, Nebraska, Arizona, New Mexico, regionally, where people would be retired superintendents may want to come here as a double dip, right? I'm retiring in my state. I want to come back for another round, put another 5 years in, which is, by the way, is the minimum for you to be vested in the state of Colorado, and do another superintendent job in another state. So as you look at kind of complexity and breadth, I think the back begins to describe to you what they've done just this last year. The other, just real quick, 2 pages, and there's not a decision scheduled for this tonight. It's just to illustrate what the next step might look like. And that's just to look at the bullet points of the process. Page 7, if I could draw the board's attention to page 7. There are 5 phases of the superintendent search that McPherson & Jacobson lay out, and it's probably pretty similar in any district that you're looking at. But phase 1 is really your board retreat in 5 weeks, and that is for you to establish characteristics of a new superintendent. Establish a timeline. Are you looking at Christmas hire or winter break hire? Are you looking at spring hire? Determine advertising, where you want to do that. Stakeholder input meetings, how often, how much. So each one of these phases has the McPherson & Jacobson team coming here and working with you, the board, and helping you come together. Now, I'll tell you on the back page of this is page 6. Bullet point number 3, we take the entire board through a consensus decision-making process to identify the top criteria for the selection of the new superintendent. This is something that you'll...
I have your notes.
All right, there we go. This is something that you want to spend your time on, in coming to consensus. And it may not happen all in one day. And so you'll spend time with the consultant working out what look-fors you want in the new superintendent. Then on top of that, this the 4th bullet point down, that they will meet with groups in the community, city council, county commissioners, general public, to provide input on the selection process. So you could choose to do this on your own if the board wants to lead the committees. You could also choose to designate 1 or 2 people of the board to be on that process with McPherson & Jacobson, listening to those committee meetings. There's a lot of different ways you could do this. Just depends on how much time your professional career allows and how much time you have available, right? So it's kind of that balance. McPherson & Jacobson or any other consultant would come back and say, this is what the community is saying, and this is kind of the feedback. You then, as a board, can choose to take it or not to take it. You're the hiring, and they have to meet your standards. You're the only hiring authority. This is your process. Now, my commitment is to be with you through this process. That could look like me joining in that community meetings. That could look like me meeting with Dell and Tina for them to have conversations about what they are seeing and what they're needing in the next superintendent, or with Brad Miller or others that would say this is a different structure that we want to pursue. So you'll see at the bottom of bullet point number 5 that McPherson & Jacobs consultants, which again would be any consultant, actively recruit candidates that meet the selection criteria. If desired, we will recruit a non-traditional candidate. So military, so corporate, if that makes sense, if that's where the board wants to go. And I'm not putting words in anybody's mouth. I'm just saying that it's your decision as a board what kind of leader you would like to have. And then lastly, the 2nd bullet point from the bottom, phase 5, provides a continued commitment to work with your board after you have hired this person for 1 year. that they would help you collaboratively establish annual goals for the new superintendent's first year, and evidence from previous searches shows that this space to be very positive as it fosters good transition. So what you'd be looking at is in August of next year, that you would have a clear set of goals that would be proctored or participated with the consultant to help you come up with a clear set of goals for your next superintendent. And I see that as a real positive step. So in my mind, what would happen next on a long-term search process is that you would actually have somebody like McPherson and Jacobson come in, sit at the table with Dell and Tina, and just kind of talk with the board about what this process looks like. I think you'll probably want to have phase 1 done in the next 60 days, next 45 to 60 days, so that the world out there by October 1st can kind of know what you're looking at as far as a board over the following 90 days. You'll probably, and they'll go through all of these timelines, you'll probably want to have the job posted no later than December 1st with all of these expectations, maybe as early as November 15th. Questions? And did I serve what the committee was asking?
Well, if I recall, Matthew, you suggested to us that a consultant is somebody that we might want to work with.
Or not.
Right. That they can help, and there are some schools that have had challenges bringing in new superintendents, and then the consultant has really helped them find the right applicant, things like that. And so, as I recall, we had asked if you could see if there was a consultant who might want to come up here and sort of give us a little bit more information about what they do, how they do it, and how much it would cost. I do see they have a cost proposal in here as
To
well.
do it. And I think the preference was not to have somebody sit here tonight and bend our ear, but I received this at 2 o'clock this afternoon, so just, or else I would have said it ahead of time, but hey, have them send me an email, get a cost in there, let's figure out if this is even a direction that this board wants to go.
Right, and so I appreciate you getting this for us. It really does add something for us to discuss and deliberate on. Thank you.
Thank you.
So does the board, so we have 2 tracks that we're doing right now, right? And they are divergent, or we have a team in place that can take us forward into this next year. We can also, at the same time, I don't sense an urgency to find a superintendent, but I'd like to have discussion about what are the other directors, what are you thinking about? Do we go forward with our leadership that we have most likely going into service? Do we look for another superintendent? What are your thoughts?
Well, I highly recommend that we start with this leadership team that we have in. Not only are they capable, they've been here, but we have teachers and kids coming very soon. So this, I would suggest to all the board directors that they would look at this proposal and really, if you have any more questions about it, ask for it, because we really need to decide this part of it now.
But what are your thoughts? I agree with you. I think we have a great plan proposal in place. I've seen these 2 step up and get things done before we've even said, let's do it. I have full confidence in them. But so we have 2 paths going forward here. One is what we have in place. Do we want to, at the same time, look for a superintendent?
Well, I think we should definitely, swallow the elephant one bite at a time. And we're ready for that number 1 priority, which is, I think, to give this team our approval and our blessing. As the committee, the committee is not prepared to make a recommendation to the full board this time whether we should be pursuing an interim or be waiting until a permanent. We're still gathering the information on that. And really, I think I agree with you, David, that we have so much confidence in Tina and Dell and the rest of our executive team and leadership, that to include all of our great teachers and professionals and support staff, that I don't think that the board should feel like there's a crisis or a tremendous sense of urgency that we need to be throwing together superintendent qualifications and putting a posting out there within the next 10 days. I think, I would recommend that the board look over like this proposal that Matthew has provided to us, and we should discuss a little bit about those perhaps divergent paths, because I feel very confident we've got a team that's going to be able to make sure that our schools are not only running on time, they're running well, and accomplishing the mission of educating the very finest of Woodland Park. So as to interim versus permanent, right? Like Matthew has said, there's a timeline on that, there's sort of qualifications. What I would ask, if the board would allow the committee more time to work with our leadership and to learn more about their input on an interim versus a permanent and those sorts of qualifications, to digest this sort of proposal, and be able to come back to the board whenever our next regular board meeting is with an update on that, and hopefully an opportunity to hear from other board directors as well as their thoughts on things. I don't think we should rush this. I think that we should be listening, we should be learning, and making hopefully a wise decision.
I would say a very thoughtful path. We need to be thoughtful about this and listen to them. And I did want to come to this meeting and hear what the other directors had to say or any thoughts.
I agree, and I applaud you too, and everyone that has stepped up to fulfill the roles that they need to. And I'm impressed that everyone came within, and you have a team already put together. So I say thank you very much for that. But I agree that we should. This is all new to us, and I think we do need to take our time. It's the most important decision probably any school board could make, and you've already hit the ground running. So you've got it under control, and we so appreciate that. And but I think there's so much we need to learn. We need to take our time. We need to digest what none of us have done this before. We need to digest what's been put in front of us and come together and talk about it as a team. So I don't see a rush at all.
So Sue, just so I understand, you're talking about the information that Dr. Neal just gave us this evening, not the proposal that to start the next school year.
Not the proposal for.
So are you just talking about what Dr. Neal has given to us tonight?
I am. Yes.
Okay, good. I just wanted to get that clarification.
Yes. No. They try and seal the delivery.
Okay.
So, yeah, thanks for asking. I'm thinking I am the one who's sat through this, and I can affirm a couple of things. The first thing is that the collaborative nature of the administrative team is legitimate, and it's a strength that has carried this district through a lot of highs and lows, and so I want to acknowledge that and affirm that. I also want to affirm that a process, I believe, is if we were to come to an agreement that this matrix model is what's going to carry us through into the 22-23 school year, and we do want to take our time in this, that my suggestion is that we let it run the course of this school year, and that we take our time to do the hard work of finding out, and establishing the characteristics of the new superintendent and establishing timelines and so forth. I would suggest, because I understand the incredible complexity of this a little bit, having gone through it once before, that my orientation would be that we take seriously the opportunity to have, because I've also looked at their cost proposal, and I think it's reasonable to have someone really help us through this, who's an objective facilitator, who will help us even in our August retreat, because quite honestly, I don't know if we have anything really established for what that retreat's going to look like, this could be a real help for us. So my orientation is to, yes, agree with this matrix model of leadership moving forward into the 2022-23 school year with Elle and Tina kind of definitely at the helm together, co-leading with that. And then for us to look at hiring in the normal hiring cycle, which is probably going to be end of year, first of 23, and then allow that to take its time so that we can find the best candidate, not based on what has been done in the past, but based on what we come up with as a board over the next 90 days. And I would say that, that being said, it's nothing that we want to rush, but it is something that we want to be very thoughtful about. And so I'm actually looking forward to that part of the process. And those are my thoughts, and I agree that Tina and Dell are highly capable. And just one other thought that I'm having here. There's been a couple of references to subcommittees doing different things. I'm definitely of the understanding that the subcommittee that was brought into place 2 weeks ago was an advisory committee specifically for this. And I would say that once we get the I's dotted and the T's crossed with regard to any modifications to their contract or the MOU and agreement, that committee then has served its purpose, and that if we want to continue with a subcommittee, that would be for further discussion of this board and its roles and so forth. But I appreciate the two of you taking the time last week to work with Dale and Tina and coming to us tonight with this proposal. Thank you.
Is there any more discussion about,
Well, I do think the focus tonight, like I really appreciate Dr. Neal bringing this, because we did discuss this in our meeting, just sort of having some options, but we wanted to take our time on this, and that's why he did bring out packets that we could take them home, but we do need to put in place this organization and this team. And I would say this is priority number one. And so our teachers can come back next week, students in our school, and they know who's sort of taking the reins.
So that almost sounds like a motion.
almost, but, I'm sorry, I was going to add into it. I hear everyone saying that we want to proceed with the plan that Tina and Del just gave us. There's some paperwork tidying up or ends to be tied up with Brad Miller and the school leadership and then the board of directors. So if we were to move forward with a motion, that motion would have to have a loose end in it for finalization paperwork. So were you going to say something, Dave?
Well, I was just going to say, I do think that the committee has a little bit more work to do, because we've not come to a decision in terms of, and I mean the board, has not come to a decision in terms of, well, we know we'd want to probably advertise in, first of the year, like for a permanent position. That's the traditional timing of that cycle. But I don't want to rush anything. I don't want to foreclose anything either. I would like the committee to continue to consult with our leadership about whether an interim superintendent is something that the board should also look at in the meantime as well. Because knowing that Tina and Del have got the reins and they're going to keep this ship going on a course, I do think we have a little bit of luxury to look at that and think about that. And maybe there is no need to seek interim leadership, and maybe we just kind of work towards a more permanent thing. But I don't want to take that off the table entirely either. So I would like the committee to be able to consult with leadership a little bit more about, do we want to look at an interim and bring that back to the board in like our next August, our regular meeting? Because I think that's really the time in which we'd have to decide whether we want to pursue an interim or simply wait the next several months and develop just like a permanent position thing. You know, of course, it's as we're saying, it's advisory, it's to consult, it's for us to listen and learn and know more about what we're getting into or what we're walking away from.
I hear what you're saying, I hear what Chris had said before, and then what Cassie's suggestion
Brad Miller.
was. Brad wants to say something. Please, Brad.
I just wanted to say to Chris's very good point, you've got this thing coming up in August. It would be very useful for the committee to work with them and maybe to work with me a little bit to identify if McPherson is the right sort of entity or if there's a different sort of approach, because there's multiples of them available out there. But you don't want to get into August, be ready for your retreat and not have that facilitator ready, so maybe that would be a good use of time as well.
So I see there's two different decisions we're making. What are we going to do with the proposal for stepping into this school year? And then also, what are we going to do, what's our retreat meeting going to look like? And discussing if we want to have an interim superintendent, if we want to discuss what that superintendent.
So I don't think you need to recharter the committee. I think they've got a charter that can cover that piece about getting us towards the retreat in the sense of working with them. I think you just want a motion. I move to approve the matrix leadership proposal as presented and to direct the matrix leaders and legal counsel to enter into an addendum or MOU to their contracts to give specificity around the roles and salary.
And that would all be part of that.
And by the way, I take superintendent's recommendation or insight into how to determine the salary, which would be sort of let's not go beyond what we've paid, but use some of what would have gone to the superintendent to compensate them.
Are we ready to make a motion like Dr. Neal?
I just can't get around the timeline dynamic, and so it sounds very open-ended. And I think anytime you're dealing with an MOU, addendum to a contract, it's probably wise to not only clarify roles and responsibilities and compensation, but the timeline of expectation.
So I would say to make it effective, whatever the effective date is, immediately or next Thursday, whatever the date is, and then for the MOU to be finalized with them and presented to the board at its next regular meeting.
As signed.
Yeah, completed. Even on consent, basically.
Or even on a Friday, so could be sent as
I need it approved by the board. It's a contract document. If the board chooses to reside in me, you, and them, then I would say yes.
Because the next board meeting will be after the transaction begins, which we August 1st. Sorry, board, to clarify, the MOU may want to be officiated by Mr. Miller and put in place by August 1st to have the transaction of authority being that mantle being passed to Dell and Tina before your next board meeting. And so it would be, to Chris's point, allocating that resource or that time to occur before August 1st.
It would basically just take those two columns that we saw of duties, identify them with maybe a little bit more granularity if needed. Not going to address the org chart piece, and then talk about a little compensation, which is, it's actually mathematically established. It's not going to be like my own guess. It's going to be based on a differential here.
And then that would bring you legally secure by August 1st. It would give them the authority to transact on signature authority, what they need to do on that date.
Well, I think if we're going to take an action tonight, it would be to move forward to formalize all of this with a start date. And then once that paper is agreed to, then we would have to vote on that by August 1st if that was
But
the
I'm
date
saying
that's thrown out.
you don't have to. I'm saying is you could vote on that tonight and just give that authority to Mr. Miller We know what the salary is going to be amount. You've just seen the PowerPoints and the bullet points. My role changes on August 1st to being that of advisor to the board on the search process and advisor to these guys on their new role. And so if the board were to create a motion right now to establish an MOU in accordance with what was presented this evening, the matrix leadership model, we'd be kind of done. And it would not have to come back to the board except by, this is information that was sent to you on a Friday update.
So do the directors feel comfortable with leaving that kind of in Brad Miller's hands and in Del and Tina's hands?
I also see it in your hands too.
Right.
Well, yes.
I was gonna say, I was like, I hear Matthew and Brad, and I hearing no objection from Tina and Del. I tend to think it's well within their wheelhouse to get it done, and it's critical that we have this signed, sealed, and delivered by August 1st. And since that would avoid setting up another meeting just to, dot the I and cross the T's on what we already, it sounds like, all support. I think we should have a motion to accept and approve and adopt the interim acting matrix leadership structure developed by Tina and Del, and empower Brad and Matthew.
Well, and just to be very clear, he, as a superintendent, would have the power to sign on your
Right.
behalf, so we don't even need a signature from the board. He can sign.
That's true. Empower them to finalize whatever the appropriate legal documentation is to make sure that they're going to have all the necessary authorities and powers that they're going to need to do the job.
All right. So we're going to need to give Kelly a motion.
You're almost there, Mr. Whitmore.
I do have to say, I don't feel uncomfortable with what is going to ultimately happen. I feel a bit, and I trust Brad for what he's going to do, and I know it needs to be a quick time. It needs to be, and I want to do it tonight. But the language of the MOU is something that I would want to hear. So
Then may I suggest that you and Dr. Neal sort that out with Brad Miller? As the president of the board, I believe you have the authority to do those types of business actions with the superintendent. And so since you're the one who wants to make sure that you see the language, you read the language, you're comfortable with the language, then I would entrust that to you and Dr. Neal to establish those detailed. Yep. I think-
Totally agree.
thank you, Chris. Does anybody else have that same uncomfortable, open-ended, not seeing the paper, the final paper, and voting on it?
We vote on contracts every month that we agreed, for better or for worse. I've seen the model contracts that they're based on, so I have a sense of them, and I think I have a good sense of this is like an agreement in principle, and it's often that you task the lawyer to put it into writing. But
And then with us signing it,
and I would normally love to look at everything and dwell on it and chew on it for a while, but I think time is of the essence here. I feel comfortable we have a good understanding of what the duties assigned to them are going to be, as well as that they're going to be paid appropriately and fairly for assuming those duties as long as they carry them. So, but there's certainly no reason that they can't send you a draft.
well then, would you make a motion, sir?
Okay.
That Kelly, and slowly
I'm
enough so
gonna try
Kelly
to
can
slow.
write it down.
So I would move that we accept and approve the leadership organization and plan as has been proposed here by Ms. Cassens and Mr. Garrett, and that we will use that for as long as necessary, and as long as they can do it. And we would also, at the same time, empower, delegate, and entrust to our attorney and to superintendent to finalize any necessary legal documentation so that they are appropriately empowered to assume these responsibilities. How's that sound?
Did you get that, Kelly?
Pretty much. Yeah. I have my
Okay.
recorder going. Yeah.
So we have a motion. Go ahead.
Into the motion effect, that it's effective by October.
Okay.
August
By
1st.
August 1st.
Okay, by August 1st, okay. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
So moved. Second.
Roll call vote.
I'm gonna,
Chris.
actually let Kelly, have you finished writing that out?
I'm good, and I also did.
You have it recorded?
Yes.
So we have it recorded. Kelly's got it. We have a first and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Austin.
Aye.
Dillingworth.
Aye.
Kimball. Aye. Patterson.
Aye.
Russell.
Aye. Well, thank you. I feel very comfortable with you two moving forward. Thank you for stepping up and doing
I appreciate it.
it. So we have final remarks. I do have a question though, I mean, not concerning you guys, but for our retreat, I would like to have some discussion about that with educating ourselves. Do we want our retreat focused on educating ourselves about a superintendent role?
So keeping
Dr. Neal?
on the agenda, it lists your ability to discuss this evening that related to a long-term superintendent decision. You've just taken action on the kind of the short term. So what you're suggesting is to conclude that action item, what you're suggesting is to discuss, do you want the long-term superintendent discussion to occur at your board meeting, your board retreat on August the 31st with the assistance of a Brad Miller or a consultant like McPherson or Jacobson, or do you want both? I would, yeah, that is, I want to keep it contained to that because that's what is approved on the agenda.
And is this something that we can take, I would like to sort of digest what the packet you gave us as well as everyone else. I'd like them to sort of take it and maybe discuss this going forward to our next meeting. So that way everyone's sort of digesting this, looking forward, and we're not really talking about this forth, but we do want to talk about our retreat. Is that something you want to talk about tonight, or do you want to discuss in our next meeting going forward?
Next meeting, please.
Because of our agenda item.
Okay. Next meeting? All right. Okay, we have closing remarks. Directors.
I just want to remark on this search and selection of a superintendent of schools, of the proposal to hire a consultant. I am all for that. Just to let you know, that's my remark. I'm all for it.
Would you like to clarify that, please?
Let's hire these guys to do what they want to help us do. I mean, they're experts at this, and I think that we can learn a lot from them as well.
Chris, did the previous board use this company?
No.
Any other directors?
Yes, I would like to say that I agree with what Director Austin has said, but none of us know what the next 90 days is going to bring forth. So I would like to say that I don't feel comfortable making a commitment for the 22-23 school year without taking any action. We don't know what applicants might come to us. We don't know what the future's going to hold, so I just want to say for the record that I don't want to commit that far out because we don't know what the board is going to do between now and then.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to offer to Tina and Dell, first, my thanks, second, my congratulations, and finally to say good luck.
I agree. Thank you guys so much for your time and just putting this together in this presentation. I think for our whole district and everyone in this room to see it and sort of know what to expect and for the teachers to come in, I really appreciate you both. So thank you so much. And Dr. Neal, thank you.
My pleasure.
I'd like to say that we are in good hands, I know it. I think we have amazing teachers, staffs, everyone that supports you and the jobs that you're going to be doing. Thank you for stepping up and doing this job. I also want to thank Dr. Neal for the hard work that he's done and continues to do for our school. I'm honored to have had you as a superintendent here. And just want to express my thanks for all you've done.
Thank you.
And handing that off to you, sir.
So with permission, this evening I've reversed comments on the agenda prior to posting with Brad's review and with the boards and Mr. Rusterholz as well. And I have a few closing comments this evening and wish you well as you step into this role. And I would say it has been a true pleasure meeting these two that are sitting at the table and now carrying that mantle. I in my career have never had the privilege of working with the richness of legacy and heritage. Well, you guys got a guy that's went to elementary and high school here. I mean, Dell makes jokes like about stuff here that hilarious about, I'll go and play for the football team, or I'm going to be the new coach. And by the way, Dell is the new baseball coach next year, so he has a full plate. Looking around the room as well as at our leaders, Laura and Josh and Karen, and we have a tremendous team, and it has been truly a privilege here to serve the students of Taylor County. And it's never a day that goes by that we don't talk about, think about, and challenge ourselves about the students that we serve. Oftentimes the ones that cause us the problems, yes, but also the ones that create a great deal of harmony and joy. Oliver is playing in the next couple weeks, and to go in and watch our own kids, in a summer production, it just brings a richness to our lives to think about the quality of kids that we have here. I would tell you that I was brought here for the right reason, for the right season. And you kind of look at your career and you think about why this, why now. I remember I was sitting in the Middle East making phone calls. For me, it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and for these guys, it was about 7 o'clock at night. Interviewing and asking questions, and what are you about, and who are you? And we started in March and April getting to know each other, and it was truly, I felt at times that I was in the wagon that was already running. And I didn't get, Tina and I were talking about this today. You have to know as a superintendent what kind of organization you're leading. And it was not me driving, it was us together collaborating. And so one of my greatest lessons was walking into a cabinet meeting on a Monday morning, and which for me is about 45 minutes of just telling them what needs to happen. And it was 4.5, 5 hours of us discussing what needs to happen. And that's just the way that things are here. And that was a tremendous, wonderful learning for me. Many of you don't know that between the time that I interviewed, the day of my interview, and the day of my offer, that my father passed away. And so you have those kind of moments, those clandestine memories, where I was walking back in for an offer, pretty going through a season of, is this the right decision, and is this what my father would want me to do? And it was really clear to me that this is the right place for the right season at that time, and it still is looking back. We're happy as a family to be continuing on as parents and kids in the community. And Tina and I were talking today about my wife teaching music here. And I get to be dad, and I get to be husband, and running the sound system at Columbine Elementary, and that'll be a true joy. And we'll continue to support. Thank you for all that you have done as a community to welcome us. And we will continue to be here and be welcomed. And we'll just see you on the other side. My role over the next 6 months changes, as the board has agreed to allow me to do. And I look forward to advising on this process and coming to the retreat and showing up and doing the parts that you need, and then leaving and letting you figure out all the rest of the details. And that is really my role as a transitional superintendent. I talked to Dell and Tina today about meeting with them every couple of weeks. hey, what do you need? How you doing? They don't need a lot, I'll tell you that. They know their stuff really well. But as we continue to partner and look at over the next 6 months to make sure there's a smooth transition, it's been an honor and to serve and a pleasure to serve the students of Woodland Park School District and the kids of Teller County. Thank you for that privilege. So as the earliest meeting of the year, I believe, I will relinquish the floor to the board.
Thank you, Dr. Neal. So, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Austin.
Aye.
Illingworth.
Aye.
Cameron. Aye. Patterson. Aye. Russell.
Aye. Meeting's adjourned.
I think we're all